Hey, I'm the Wolfman, and I want to thank you so much for tuning in. And I am here today at the Harvest Gathering, which is held in the Kawartha Lakes once a year. And this is an amazing gathering that has upwards of 100 to 200 people, and we come together for 3 or 4 days, depending on how the organization is put together. And this year it's 4 days, and I have Brian here, and you want to tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Oh yes, I'm Brian. I'm from the Belleville area. I'm a correctional officer for the provincial government, and I just love being out in the bush and living in the great outdoors.
That's really cool. So you come here to camp. So do you camp a lot outside of coming to this event?
I do a fair bit of camping, northern New York State, northern Ontario. I love kayaking and just being in the wilderness.
Wow, that's really cool. So what draws you to come here versus go somewhere else?
Well, this is a great venue for like-minded people that love the outdoors experience and getting back to traditional handcrafts. There's a wealth of experience to be learned from other people that are in the same lifestyle and getting back to the roots.
Cool. Well, thank you very much. So this is Darian, and Darian is one of the organizers of this event. So do you want to tell us a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure, Wolf. So my name's Darian, and I've been coordinating the Harvest Gathering since 2011. Kind of an offshoot of the Headwaters Gathering, which started in 2008 and is now primarily focused in Western Ontario. The need was seen that we needed to have something very similar in Eastern Ontario. So we went from having 2 gatherings a year with Headwaters to 1 Headwaters and 1 Harvest, and we've kind of taken different branches of learning modalities at this point. Now, Harvest Gathering, we're focusing quite a lot on community development and community learning and tapping the resources from within our own networks to provide education, learning opportunities, skills care, skills crafting, and stewardship for 1 weekend a year, actually 4 days for a year, and really kind of learning a different modality, starting up with a facilitator program which allows for a year-round learning. Basically on our website we have consulted with a historian, an archaeologist, an anthropologist, and came up with a list of, I believe it was 72 skills that every community in a traditional sense would need to have. Everything from how to fish, to how to make a basket, to how to heal people. Each person needs to have a role. And by looking at these skills, we then figured out, okay, well, if everybody were to want to learn a skill, let's pick one that we haven't done, do an independent study for 10 months of the year, helped by our community to foster that knowledge, and then at the end of that, this gathering, they would come and present that skill, thus making the entire community stronger and deeper, but their own process of learning has covered an entire year and it's transformed their own education as well.
That's pretty spectacular. So what is this gathering? You said is slightly different than that gathering. So how does Harvest?
Well, that is Harvest.
That is Harvest as well.
So the Headwaters Gathering, I can't speak much to at this point, but to my understanding is very skills intensive.
Okay.
Bringing in very, very expert professional people.
Right.
Covering very dynamic skills. And with us, it's more a lay education based, where we're taking members of our own community doing their own self-exploration, learning this new skill. The website's actually really neat for that, because we take those 72 skills, break them down even further into, first off, skills that are fire-based, water-based, animal-based, utilitarian-based, spirit-based. So a lot of people feel drawn to one particular aspect of that, and they can kind of chart what their progression might be for a new skill to learn. And then beyond that, we developed into skills that every member of the community would have, something from simple knots, for example, or how to sharpen a knife, to skills that maybe, half of the population of a community would have. Making a basket, how to trap, how to clean an animal, things like that. And then one more skill, maybe 1 out of 10 people would have, a specialty skill. Something like shamanism or herbalism, things that take really an intrinsic study to master. So people can really chart out how much time they have to dedicate, what type of calling they feel towards, and then from that, what skill the community needs, and they can present it forward at the end of their 1 year long journey. But most people at Harvest Gathering just come out for the 4 days and learn a lot of stuff for free, or by donation at least, and get to really become empowered by the sense of community that we've established.
Wow. And it is definitely a sense of empowerment that I find, and a sense of community. Every time I come out, and we've talked about this before on the radio show, that, it's very often that all of us here, we go into our social circles, and you're like, you are the Survivor Man guy, you are the the top guy. But when you come here, everybody's kind of on a more or less an even playing field, right? Even the people that come in are like, I didn't know somebody was interested in bushcraft and knives and forging and gutting and things like that. And so I find that really an attractive thing. So you talked about costs. So what if you were to come to an event like this? I would expect that it would be a high-priced event, $200-300. How much does it cost to come to an event like this one?
We really are trying to avoid using cost as a prohibitive factor for learning. A lot of us believe that knowledge shouldn't have a price to it. But that said, there are a lot of logistics that have to be taken into account. A gathering like this, I can tell you right offhand that insurance is about half of our cost. Because we have people playing with knives and fire, and they may have never done it before, and they're camping out. We've had some small issues with bear this weekend. Well, there is only one insurance company in Ontario that I can find who are willing to sign off on an event like that. So there's quite a cost there. But that said, we understand that people have hard times, and perhaps maybe not the most affluent of individuals are comfortable enough learning these skills. So we only ask for a donation. Suggested around $25 for a 4-day weekend. That doesn't cover your food. But the only other obligations to that are obviously that you play safe, that you sign up for 2 work crews. So somebody may be making sure we have water at a meal, or making sure that the latrines have toilet paper, things like that. And yeah, that you come out and have fun and just bring good energy. We don't ask for a lot of money. This is not a profit type thing. This is community building. This is establishing a network of individuals who believe that we have so much we can learn from nature. And when we bring everybody together with that ethic in mind, amazing things can happen.
Wow. Yeah, so I think it was Saturday, so it was the second day of the event. We were sitting around at the fire, and 2 people walked by with a gutted deer. I mean, that was awesome, right? So I mean, that really helped empower people to say, I've always wanted to do that, but I'm a little afraid to, or the guts are scary or whatever. And then I attended this workshop where they showed me using your thumbs rather than knives or whatever, how to do it, something that I have no experience in. But I think the community can't. It's hard to capture that, on film or in recording, of the sense of community of saying, okay, I'm on water duty, and now I have to make sure it's my personal responsibility that there's water, my personal responsibility that fire is cut. And I think, I don't know how you feel about this, but I think maybe it's a lot of people in the community miss that sort of personal responsibility and how gratifying it actually is to do something like that.
Absolutely. In our what I call the concrete jungle world, the urban world, the world that we all end up going back to inevitably at the end of these gatherings, we have come accustomed to paying taxes, and those taxes pay other people to take care of the things we take for granted. And of course, by not charging fees, we don't have staff, and people become reliant. But because we are fostering an entire community, the community themselves have to be responsible for the whole community. Each person here is responsible for everybody, and that way you feel protected, and you feel safe, and you feel taken care of without a whole lot of effort being put in. One point that I wanted to add about watching a deer being carried is sometimes learning is impromptu. The people who were carrying that deer I chose very specifically as people who have shied away from touching an animal that has passed away. They weren't aware what they agreed to when I asked if they could carry some goods from point A to point B. The look on their faces as they passed me, as I started laughing, was definitely a sign of first scowling, but they understand that there's a learning. We had another individual who was kind enough to donate to our potluck gathering, which was Saturday evening. We meet and we all share food. He donated some rabbits. Now the small part, which I guess was easier for him to transport, was that they were still alive when he donated them.
Wow.
And so I kind of went out on a bit of a quest to find people who had done that skinning workshop like you talked about, had learned about processing an animal, but have never actually taken a life. And ended up finding two individuals, one of which being a nurse who saves lives her entire life, who's a healer, who now has to take, not out of malice, not out of a negative place, but because it's the same as what you buy in a grocery store, but you're doing all the work yourself. So it ties right back into the community having to take care of their water and their latrines. Taking care of your food is part of that. Death is a part of life. We have to nourish our bodies, and now that individual, that nurse, now sees the other side of the equation for the first time.
Wow, that's pretty amazing, because I would imagine that most people who don't actively engage in outdoor activities, hunting, don't really have a concept of how it got from, for example, rabbit to food or cow to food, and it's a very interesting process, and it's really, really fascinating. So it's a really interesting thing. Now, what message would you give to people who would look at all this and go, that's scary? I just like camping in Algonquin Park out of my car. I'm not really interested in like that. Maybe they would feel it as very raw and bushcrafty. To try to encourage someone to come out who may be very intimidated by what they see here, or that we're all too hardcore for them.
I think what I would say, I would illustrate with an example to begin with. We have a gentleman here by the name of Jim. And Jim has a lot of knowledge in healing, and that's how he's established his profession. Has not spent the time in the bush the way perhaps you and I have. And when he first came, he felt a little intimidated by, for example, people rendering bear fat on the fire. He was kind of taken aback by that, and his stomach kind of did a couple of flops, until people explained why the bear was being harvested and what the fat can be used for. And he came up to me today, after being here for 3 days, explaining how empowered he now feels, knowing that nature has its uses, and that these things that may at first seem very foreign and difficult for us to process are in fact a part of life that we're paying other people to take care of. So it really is self-sufficiency, and I don't mean that in the prepper, the zombie apocalypse sense. I mean that in the taking the ethical route of being responsible for what you take from the world, and not just using monetary value to push that onto somebody else to take care of for you. It's important to note that, we don't all have the same skill set. But that's what community's about. That's why I established these 72 skills, and every person can take one, right? So that as a community, we can thrive. We can be part of things. Not one person is going to learn all 72 and be a master at it. We need to rely on each other. But it's so much better when I can put a face to the person, right? As opposed to the grocery store with the anonymous SKU and price tag that tells me how much that person's time has been worth.